Hey everyone, welcome to Coffee and Compete, the show about the news, gossip, and tactics of competitive business strategy. Brought to you as always by Clue. I'm Adam McQueen. Join with me is the guy at Clue that uses Clue. It's Hunter. Hunter, what's going on, buddy?
I'm doing well. I'm super excited for this episode today. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Very excited indeed because we have a special guest. We have Valerie Bonaldo, the Director of Product Marketing at Seismic. Valerie, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
We're covering all across the gambit on WinLoss this season so far. We've covered how to generate interview pipeline, even the foundations you need to get set up, how to conduct an interview with your buyers, your sellers. We've covered a lot, and you're actually coming in here on this kind of the final hurdle of the win-loss puzzle, which is distribution. How do you get this into the hands of the right people as effectively as possible so that they can action on it? So I can't wait to dig into this with you. But let's go back to the start for a minute. What was the catalyst that made you even say, hey, we need to start doing this win-loss thing?
We've been running our win-loss program with Clue since 2021. So going on 4 years now, which has been great. But what we started was we actually had a hypothesis that we were trying to prove or disprove, which was, doesn't matter if you're the first vendor in the deal, if you have the first seat at the table. Does that impact your win rates or not? So we went out and we did a quick study and we determined that actually it does. And that impacted some of the changes that we made about lead generation and outreach. And then that also prompted us to go further with win-loss and build it out into a full program, which is where we are today.
Wow. Okay. So where did you end up taking it, by the way? So take us through that. You started off with this idea of trying to disprove or prove whether or not there's an advantage to being the first person in the deal, and you found out, yes, there is. Where'd you take it, and who did you start enabling with those insights afterwards?
So we originally went straight to the sales and marketing team, and we explained to them, there's opportunity here, quick response on any requests for demos coming in from our website, quick response by the SDR team and making sure that they're building out the opportunities quickly. So it was really a matter of being effective and being ready to engage with customers as quickly as possible.
Where did the hypothesis come from? Was this like a full go-to-market thing that the go-to-market leadership were kind of debating back and forth? Was it assumption or a theory that you had? Where did that kind of come from?
So it was more like gut instinct in talking with some of the outreach team and some of our team who's doing lead generation. And we were trying to figure out what we could be doing and what really mattered. We were trying to understand something about our win-loss rates, why we're winning, why we're losing, what does it matter in the sales flow? And so somebody said, we're not always the first at the table. Sometimes we're getting into a conversation and the buyer's like, oh, well, I've already met with so-and-so and so-and-so, and you guys are the third. They've kind of already started to form an opinion as to what they need and what they're looking for, and other people are driving the narrative, and we realized that was putting us behind the 8 ball and we needed to get in front of it.
I like that the starting point for all win-loss came from a very, very specific question, because there are so many questions that can be answered through win-loss, but I like this example. And I don't think I've heard this one as a specific, here's the impetus for starting to invest into win-loss even more. And that was obviously 4 years ago. Fast forward to today, and you have one of the most sophisticated programs running, which is why we've got you on. But win-loss programs can look a little different too, depending on who your primary stakeholders are. You mentioned there that might have been sort of a sales and marketing starting point. Who are your top stakeholders today? Are there more? And how does that influence how you're doing sort of win-loss?
It definitely influences how we're doing win-loss. When we started, sales and product were our primary stakeholders. We wanted to help answer questions for them. But when we actually started the process, we didn't just stop there. We asked all the key stakeholders, all the key executives at Seismic, what would you want to get out of a program if we were to do a full-fledged win-loss program? What would you think that we should be coming back and giving you answers on? And, we did an internal survey, we got some feedback, and that really helped. And in the beginning, it was the sales and the product team who took the biggest notice of what we were doing and so forth. Then the executive team got very involved in understanding, well, what are we doing with this information? How are we sharing it? Enablement raised their hand. They wanted to be a part of what we're learning from our win-loss, and customer success as well. So we've really touched all the departments within the go-to-market organization that are going to be impacted by win-loss. And there's really a little bit of information that can go a long way across all of those teams.
Would you say that it's sort of equally split across those different teams, or do you kind of favor, sales and marketing or product more than others? Or how do you think about that balance?
When we're looking at it, our primary audience that we want to help out is the sales and enablement team. So making sure that we're helping the sellers and everybody who's in a deal cycle to move their deal cycles forward. Obviously, driving higher win rates is a great bonus, a great key to what we're trying to do. So we want to make sure that we're delivering for sales. Equally important, as we've driven our program and expanded it, is delivering to product. Where are any gaps, or at the same time, high enthusiasm for the outcomes that we're driving through our innovations, through our roadmap? Where should we be doubling down and making sure, because we're hearing positive feedback from our buyers, or opportunities where our loss interviews are telling us why they're choosing other vendors to deliver a platform to them. So it's been very, very helpful in that area. As we expanded our program and started looking at everything else we should be doing, we started taking into consideration renewals. What are we learning from our customers today that we could be applying in conversations for renewals? Customer success is a key stakeholder in our go-to-market motions, so we need to make sure that we're sharing outcomes with them, letting them know what's happening. And so when we get a report back from Clue, not only, especially if it's a win report, not only are we sharing it with the AE who won the account and the sales engineer who was involved in the sales cycle, we're also sharing it with the customer success manager so that they get off on the right foot and make sure that they have the holistic view of what happened before they got handled the account to manage. And that's very important and very relative, because a buyer is often telling us that they're looking at the experience during the sales cycle to be a representation of how the company is going to treat them afterwards once they onboard and as they go on day to day. And hearing in a win report, the sales cycle was fantastic, we were really engaged, and sharing that back with the customer success manager so they understand what the expectations are really sets up the account for success.
So let's get into a little bit of this piece around distribution of win-loss. You just mentioned there so many teams that find value and get supported by some of the work you're doing with win-loss right now. How does your delivery approach change depending on the team that you're supporting? Like, what does that look like? Maybe pick one to three of these departments and sort of walk us through a day in the life of Valerie supporting sales, supporting product, and how those things just there's a slight nuance to each department to make sure that they're being supported as effectively as possible.
So distribution is very important. Making sure that we activate what we're learning from win-loss. Really, it's a day-to-day job. There's lots of opportunities, and you just have to really remember, the sales team, the go-to-market team, they have a lot of signals coming to them all the time. They're head down on their sales cycles, trying to move things forward. So sometimes remembering to check a notification or look at something can be time consuming for them, and they don't want to take their eye off the ball. So we have, our great platform, the number one revenue enablement platform in the space, Seismic, and we use our platform to share out information around win-loss. We have a whole section of channel, which is our way of doing peer-to-peer engagement. We share with the sales team great win reports, great win stories. Just last week, I shared a great win story because during the sales cycle, the seller did such a great job that the buyer brought it up in the win interview, was really enthusiastic about it, talked about all the steps that the seller took to make him look like a champion to his buying committee. and make sure that he had everything in place. And that really is a key to peer-to-peer sharing. You want that seller to be able to share that with their peers. They may not have all the signals, so using our solution, we can share information out. I was also able to promote it in the sales leaders newsletter that Enablement puts out to make sure that all the sales leaders were seeing this information as well and sharing it. It's a great opportunity for sales leaders to do enablement with their own team. Take that win report, invite that AE to a team meeting and really dig in. What did you do? What do you do differently? What kind of best practices? And all of that is generated from these win reports.
Oh, I love that. One thing that I'm curious about as well, and you kind of touched on this, is for a little bit of context at Clue, we take our win-loss findings and we present them directly to sales, but we also present them to functional leadership groups as well. So I'm curious, how do you think about that at Seismic, taking these win-loss insights, presenting them directly to frontline sellers, frontline CSMs, versus bringing them to middle management and senior management?
So we try and do as much everywhere all at once, if so to speak. Every quarter we get our readout from Clue, from the reports that we've driven, and we marry that with the other win-loss data we have. We look at the holistic picture. Obviously, we're not setting everybody up for an interview. Not everybody's accepting to do an interview. So we have to marry that information with all the other signals we're seeing in our win-loss. And then we do make an effort to get in front of the sales teams at the seller level so that we're making sure every quarter they're hearing from us, they're having those findings. And for those people who aren't able to attend and don't have time or care to watch the recording either at, even at 1.5 speed, we have, once again, our platform where we can promote our wins. We can promote, I have a whole win-loss area in our platform where sellers can go and read reviews, read the reports themselves. We give them access to the reports so that they can read them. And we make sure that we're constantly updating the information to make sure that everybody understands, here are the top reasons that buyers are choosing us. Here are the top challenges that we're facing when we're losing. So let's figure out how to overcome it. And then we work closely with all the other stakeholders. Enablement, is there an enablement session? Is there a improvement to the lesson on training around that competitor that we need to deploy? So we're always looking for how many ways can we activate the learning to make sure it is driving conversation and driving improvement, and really that we're showing the return of investment that we're giving into this program.
So not just saying, hey, these are the insights, but really taking the insights, figuring out, okay, what are the specific actions that we can take based on that, whether that is, reinforcing our differentiated value or, could be objection handling, something like that. One of the things that you mentioned there too around of course you can't interview every single buyer. That would be amazing, but challenging. So you marry up your win-loss data with other types of win-loss data. What does that process look like for you?
We look within our Salesforce CRM solution, and we have a whole data dashboards that we're tracking so that I can go in and I can select a specific deal that maybe we didn't get a win-loss interview on and go into the details. I have to say I'm spoiled here at Seismic. We have a really strong sales team. They're really good at writing notes in Salesforce. I know that that's a privilege I have. Not all teams are necessarily that great at sharing information in Salesforce or any CRM. And marrying the data that we're seeing in there, because maybe we see a trend in losses, and I'll go into other loss opportunities that we didn't interview and see if that trend is surfacing there, so that I have a little bit more insight and direction on the trends that we're seeing. We don't have enough data that we can say is statistically reliable, but it's strongly directional because we're seeing it in multiple places. We also have benefit with our platform of call recording and being able to listen to sellers' calls so that we can see, are there other signals in there that we're surfacing? The seller wrote this in their notes. Let me go listen to the call and see what the extent of the whole conversation. So we're doing as much of a holistic view as we can to make sure that when we surface something, especially at the executive level, that we have that substantiation besides just one verbatim in a win or a loss interview, that we're able to look at everything as a total view, so that if we're going to make a change, we have more than one reason to make the change.
What about Cadence? There's a lot of noise out there for a seller, for example, and I mean every team. You have to get it in front of them, but you also don't want to also become that noise. So like, how do you think about Cadence and maybe the different ways in which you're getting what you're finding from win-loss in front of them so it does stick?
Well, I think everybody, is familiar with the quarterly business reviews. We try and get a seat at the table when that's happening. We have the opportunity to also present at our executive leadership team. They have quarterly meetings. So there's many avenues that I've been able to tap into and make use of. Now, instead of hunting them down and asking, hey, can I be invited? They're often reaching out to me and saying, hey, we haven't heard from you lately. Let's have you come and present. That's the momentum that we've built, because we do have findings that are very relevant and useful for them. They're giving me a seat at the table, which is very helpful. But in the beginning, I had to go knock on doors and say, I have great findings here. I think your team needs to hear this. Look, what I'm seeing in the commercial sector is more important for the commercial team, so I really need to present to the commercial team. And looking at those findings, sometimes we might hear back, well, that's not really what we're focused on or what we're struggling with. Here's what we're struggling with, Valerie. How can your team help us? And that might change some of our interview guides. We may go in and specifically ask different questions the next quarter from our interview guide to get the answers that they need. That's the benefit of how we've been running our win-loss, is that every quarter we have an opportunity to make adjustments and changes to gather very pointed feedback from our win-loss interviews.
What's the reception been like when you're making these presentations to leadership, to sales, to the revenue teams at the quarterly kickoffs? Would love to understand a little bit more about that. And also, I'm also curious, like, is there anything that you do that like really clicks with these teams that they seem to latch onto and resonate with in these presentations?
I think what really helps is that we share the reviews. We share the interviews and the readouts, and we share key findings. Every quarter we're refreshing that. And we use Slack a lot. So there's constant communication in Slack. When somebody says, hey, what about this? I might point them to a win interview and say, take a look at this one. It's really going to help you. Here's a verbatim. You're not going to name the customer because we're not going to allow that. But here's what somebody said that I think will resonate with your buyer. So we really try and leverage as much as possible. The reception has been very positive. In the beginning, there's always that hesitancy of, oh, is somebody looking to undermine how I present? Or is somebody going to call me on the carpet because I didn't take certain actions at the same time that the sales leader wanted me to? That's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is open, honest feedback from our sales team and from our buyers to really understand what can we improve. We've gotten feedback on our UI UX and areas that we can improve, which we've deployed. And then we've gotten feedback from the new buyers saying, we love Seismic's UI UX. It's great. We've gotten feedback on how we do demos in a sales cycle, and now gone back and improved how we do demos in a sales cycle. So those early findings have really given us the opportunity to continue to drive improvement and really measure that quarter over quarter and say, look, yes, we are doing better here. Now we're getting feedback from our buyers saying, oh, the demos were right on point. They really pulled us into the platform and showed us exactly what we needed. They really listened to us during discovery. So hearing that feedback just reinforces, hey, we're doing the right things. We're using the right findings. And the sales team they're just absorbing that and using it the next time.
What's your favorite win-loss insight that you've managed to uncover and then implement into some sort of change like that? Like, is there one specifically, maybe it was some of the first times you start to really get valuable stuff from these buyer interviews, but I'd love to know the one that sticks in your head of like, this was an awesome piece of feedback and I can't wait to like share this out and implement it in some change.
We were starting to hear some feedback that maybe Seismic wasn't seen as a true partner in the marketplace. And we were like, wait, what? Why is that coming up? So we started looking deeper into our surveys, and we were actually able to completely combat that and say, no, here are the numbers to support the number of times that people are saying in interviews, Seismic is our strategic partner. We see them as the partner who's going to take us to the next level. And to be able to hear that coming up from our sales team and get back to them and say, absolutely not. This is exactly what we're hearing from the field. Our buyers do see us as strategic partners, and you can go out and tell your next buyer, yes, people who buy Seismic buy it because we're our strategic partner for you, and we are going to help you drive your outcomes.
What about challenges? We've talked a lot about successes here and some of like the awesome feedback you've received from some of your different stakeholders, but what are some of the challenges you've bumped into throughout this sort of like win-loss process, and then specifically around this distribution, getting awareness of what you're uncovering amongst teams?
I would say, no one hates to lose, obviously. Losses are always the hardest ones to recruit because the buyer, they've made their choice, they've moved on. So getting those loss interviews to equal the number of win interviews we're doing can sometimes be challenging because there's such a richness of what you can learn from a lost interview that's just as equivalent from a win interview. We want to learn how we're going to improve. Clearly, we missed the mark with some of these customers. Where should we continue to enable our team to improve those losses? Sometimes it's even on our end where the seller might say, oh, I had 2 calls. It was over quickly. We got dropped. There's not going to be any richness in the interview there. It's like, well, why don't you let me decide? Let's see if we can propose this to the lost interview and if they'll bite. And then the other thing is just staying on top of the activation of what we're learning, making sure that I'm continually getting a seat at the table. With everything that is happening around on sales and just generally in the market, with things slowing down and the economy and so forth, sometimes it's hard to be a priority for the sales team or for the enablement team to make sure that they're hearing areas that we should really be doubling down on or improving on because they have so many things coming at them. So it's finding creative ways to further enable the team, make more actionable insights come out of the win-loss interviews, give them resources that they can share externally with their buyers. Hey, this is what we've learned from customers who've switched to Seismic. This is why they chose to switch to us, and make sure that they're really using those and leveraging that. Being able to tie that back into the next win and say to a team, they use this content, they won this deal, maybe you should consider using it, has been really helpful. The other beauty that I love about our program is, having to have the privilege of running this program as long as we have, we're now at the point where customers who didn't choose us 3 years ago and signed that 3-year contract with a competitor are now signing with Seismic. And it's great. I have a loss interview from 3 years ago. I have a win interview from now. And I can go back and look at what we did differently and how we helped that customer make the transition over to Seismic. So that's been really powerful.
Wow, I love that last part. I think that's so cool how you can take a loss interview and then compare it to the win interview. I think that's super, super cool. One of the questions that I think a lot of people ask when they're first getting started with a win-loss program is, if I'm going to do all of this work and I'm going to get this set up, how should I be thinking about measuring the outcomes and sort of like measuring the impact of the program? And I think a lot of people do this a little bit different. Some folks look at win rates. Some folks, they literally just look at output metrics. Some take a bit of a qualitative approach with like feedback metrics and things like that. How do you think about measuring the impact of a win-loss program, Valerie?
So we do start with win rates. Obviously we're measuring the win rates. Are we seeing the needle go in the right direction? That's really important. And then, there's a couple of things that we've done. So voice of the customer is very important to Seismic. So being able to measure against our innovations or our enhancements based on what we've heard in win-loss, as well as what we're hearing through our voice of the customer program, really goes hand in hand. So that's one area that we've been able to measure. Another area that we measure is, are people, because we can track who's viewing the content in our platform, are people viewing the content? Are they engaged with the content? Are they asking further questions on the content? And then, as I mentioned earlier, if I've developed a piece of content that is shareable and can be used with the customer, are we doing that? Are sellers grabbing that content, sharing it in their digital sales rooms? And is the buyer looking at that content? We have all those metrics that we're capturing, and I can go in and look and see, well, this one didn't land very well. You know what? Maybe we don't need to refresh it. Maybe I need to pivot and do a different messaging campaign that will help the sellers because this one didn't work so well. Or this one did really well. Everybody's using it in their digital sales rooms. Let's make sure we keep this content fresh.
That's interesting. I like that, like different tiers as well. That like obviously end metric of like a win rate, very important. I like whenever we think about our own OKRs and the projects we work on, it has to ladder to a really key objective or an outcome. But at the same time, recognizing that there's a lot of influencing factors to that. So what are the leading indicators like consumption that are like likely laddering up to something like that as well? So
yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I'm curious about too is like more advice for someone who is getting started with a win-loss program. So imagine that you're speaking with someone who they've started running their win-loss program. Maybe they're doing it in-house. They've collected their own insights. And now they're trying to figure out, okay, how do I want to distribute these throughout the company and really make an impact? What's like one piece of advice that you would share to that person?
Well, I would definitely start and make sure that you have alignment with at least one executive. When I started my program, our chief marketing officer at the time was my executive sponsor. And that really helped because he opened the doors and drew conversation at the executive leadership level to say, we're doing this. There's some really great findings already. We've only done one session of them, but here are a few data points that we've uncovered, which was eye-opening right away. So having that executive stakeholder is really key, whether it's for me, it was the chief marketing officer, but maybe it's the CRO, maybe it's who's ever driving the business operations, something like that. So that can be very helpful. And making sure that you're looking at, are there trends? Hopefully you've done enough interviews, a dozen interviews to see if there's a common theme that's surfacing and using that as a lead in to the conversation. We're seeing in 4 out of 5 interviews that this is bubbling up. What should we do about it? Here's my recommendation. Do you think this will work? So not only coming to the table with the trend that you're seeing, but a proposal as to what you think could be a solution. It not only gives you the opportunity to weigh in on the findings, but also to give them an understanding of the reach that your program could have. I mean, I never expected that we would have a different take on how we do demos coming from the win-loss program when we first started. We want to make sure sellers were on track, using the right talk track, using the right cadence and doing proper discovery. But then finding out that we had an opportunity to really up-level our demos was a huge win for us. So that was very helpful.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like get the executive sponsor first. That's going to be absolutely key for opening up the right doors. Taking the approach of even having like those recommendations in your presentations. And it almost sounds like just keeping an open mind as well. Those are, I think, great pieces of advice, by the way. So appreciate that very much. And Valerie, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the pod and talk about your experiences with win-loss and your insights around how to distribute your intel.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share. And I look forward to any feedback from your audience.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Valerie. And we'll catch everyone next week.